Everybody, I want you to welcome my good friend, Dr. Nick Morgan. Now, Nick Morgan is one of America's top communication theorists and coaches, a passionate teacher. He's committed to helping people find clarity in their thinking and ideas, and then delivering them with oomph, I like to talk about. And he has been commissioned by Fortune 50 companies to write for many CEOs and presidents. He has coached people to give congressional testimonials, to appear on Today's Show, and delivered unforgettable TED Talks. I want everybody to please welcome Dr. Nick Morgan. Nick, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show, Amir. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for being here. The reason why you're on the show is I read your book. I think it was like 2 months ago, because you and I first originally met at Jason's event, Mastermind Talks.
Yes.
And that's when I picked up your book. And I love communication. I love figuring out, okay, what does it really take to convince somebody? Like, is there certain things that we can improve on? Is it our body language? Is it how we speak? Is it our tonality? Is it our vocabulary? And you address every single one of those elements inside of your book. So my first question, Nick, is what persuaded you to write this beautiful book?
Well, it was actually the real reason was I had lunch with my agent, and he said, "Time to write another book, Nick." So I knew that was coming, and he said, "What do you got going on that's interesting?" And I had just read about this amazing research about the human voice and how we determine our leaders through the signals that voices send out that we can't even consciously hear. We sense them unconsciously, but and that's chapter 4 of the book. And as I started telling him about this, he couldn't believe it. The agent was blown away, and I said, "Okay, we're onto something here." So that was the origin of the book. Really was chapter 4 over lunch.
So let's kind of summarize something over here. You know, most people who are listening to this are entrepreneurs or starting off a startup. What are some key mistakes that you see most, say, entrepreneurs or executives or CEOs or people who are in a position of leadership make when it comes to communication?
Well, the question I ask people, and when I talk to audiences, I ask them, I say, so you're getting ready for an important meeting or even a conversation, or let's say a speech, a presentation, a pitch, if you're running a startup and you've got venture capitalists. How much time do you spend thinking about the content versus your body language? And the answer is always 100% content, 0% body language. And then I say, oh, that's interesting, because when those two are aligned, when your body language does support your content, you can be an effective communicator. It's great. People will hear the content, you're good to go. But when the two are not aligned, when for some reason your body language undercuts your content or has a different message than your content, then what happens is people believe the body language every time. It always trumps the content. And so I say you're spending 100% of your time prepping the content, that which will be trumped by the body language, what you're spending 0% of your time on. That's crazy, isn't it? And they go, yeah, it's crazy. Sorry, Nick, you tell me what to do. So I crush them, I break their spirit, and then I explain what it is you need to do. But seriously, the issue is, so we make a couple of mistakes all the time. And let's say it's a meeting, a conversation, but it's an important one. When we walk in there, what's our body language radiating? Well, typically for most people, classic mistake number 1 is it's radiating your to-do list. That is, you've got lots in your mind, what the yogis in India call the monkey mind. We're thinking of all kinds of things all the time. We're thinking of our to-do list, what we got to do tomorrow, what we got to do tonight. We've got to remember to pick up milk and eggs on the way home. We got a vacation coming up, or we don't have a vacation, whatever. It's all running around in our mind. That, when we show up that way to an important meeting, our body language telegraphs that we're not present, we're not focused, we're not fully there. So that's the first mistake people make. The other typical mistake is they get wired for the meeting. They're nervous if it's really important, if the stakes are really high, and then their body language telegraphs their nervousness. And so what happens is the disjunct there is that the content is, hey, this is going to work, and let me tell you about my great company and how we're going to have sales through the roof in a year. And the body language is saying, not going to work. I'm terrified. You'd be crazy to invest with me. And that message, people do send that out all the time. So what Power Cues is about getting deliberate about your body language, about that second conversation, so that it's boosts your confidence so that you can be an effective communicator.
So let me ask you this, Nick. If I'm approaching, say, some VCs to pitch them my startup, and when I walk in the door, what would you personally do the first thing when you walk in the door? Because obviously there's that old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but you and I know that's totally false. People judge right away, how you dress, how you look, how you move, all the things above. So
Right.
personally, if you had a new startup right now and you had to pitch, say, okay, you want to raise $10 million, what would you do as soon as you enter the door?
Well, I do a couple things before I entered the door. It's what actors call the offstage beat. So when an actor is getting ready to walk on stage, instead of just walking on stage and then saying the line, great actors will get into character before they walk on stage, so they're walking out with an interesting emotion. So that's the first thing. I would focus, before I go into the room, I would focus my emotion on whatever's appropriate for that meeting. Enthusiasm. If I'm genuinely excited about my company, I want to make sure I'm radiating enthusiasm as I walk in. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes, and I've done it often enough now, I can do it in about 30 seconds, but I'm just going to go sit in a corner and I'm going to focus on that enthusiasm. So when I walk in, my body language just radiates that enthusiasm, confidence, whatever is appropriate. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, since I've got my body language then lined up, I'm going to focus on getting the 3 points or the 1 point across that I really want to, so I don't get distracted. So then I can focus on the content. But the first thing is to get your body language in line so that you are focused, you are present there in the room when the lights are on and the meeting takes place and it's all happening.
One thing, though, it's pretty cool you talked about. I think it was like maybe no, it's in the middle of the book. So probably like fourth or fifth chapter. You talk about height as an advantage.
Yeah.
Right? So that's pretty cool. So I was always thinking, like, if I'm going to pitch an investor, and if I can somehow like wear like 10-inch stilettos or some kind of like high heel boots, I come in like 7 feet tall, I have a better advantage. But can you kind of address that all about like the whole height advantage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fact, and the kind of thing we don't like to talk about, but it's a fact that what happens in a room, in a meeting, is that people sort themselves out by who's in charge, and the person who's in charge typically will put his head or her head at the highest point, and everybody else who feels subordinate unconsciously will lower their heads to get below the perceived leader in the room. And so what happens if you're not aware of this, and let's go with the venture capitalist idea again. Let's say you're a startup and you're pitching. You're going to unconsciously crouch down, keep your head below the venture capitalist whom you think has all the money, right? The most important person in the room. And as a result, you're going to defer to him or her. The real thing, the better thing to do would be to keep your head up and slightly higher than that person, because you want to show your confidence and your power in that situation. Hey, I don't need your money. This is going to be a great company with or without you. That's the message, right? You want to bring.
So basically, Nick, you're telling us we should come there with a portable platform, right?
Well,
roll it right in the doorway.
it's surprising. It sounds funny, but it isn't really about height so much, because typically you're sitting down around a conference table when it happens, right? So what you can do then, again, is just watch the position of your head. If you sit up straight in the chair, unless you're very short, and the other person is extremely tall, unless you're pitching to a basketball team, then the odds are good you can match the head of the venture capitalist. And of course, the other way to do it, if for some reason that isn't working, is to figure out a natural way to stand up. Because if everybody else is sitting down and you stand up, then you are going to be in charge of that room.
What is your take on mirror neurons? So if I'm trying to communicate with somebody, are you trying to consciously adapt to how they're moving, or like what's that take? Because there's two different camps. Some people saying mirror neurons are everything, other people saying it's not. So I'm just curious to see what your take on that is.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about two different things. So they're mirror neurons, which are the research is showing it's not all done yet by any means. It's still in experimental and early stages. But the research shows that the way we share emotions, this is why laughter is contagious, why yawning is contagious, why anger is contagious. When we go into a room full of an emotion, then what happens is the other people unconsciously fire the same neurons in their heads, the same anger or happiness or excitement neurons in their head. And so we literally leak our emotions to each other. Now, the other thing it sounded like you were talking about is mirroring behavior. That's a different thing, and that's a way of establishing trust between people. But that's a different
So
conversation.
let's touch base a little bit on mirroring people. So if you're trying to say convey your message, and obviously both parties should benefit from whatever pitch is happening. And if you notice, for example, an individual standing with cross legs, would you purposely, since you notice that, stand yourself cross-legged?
Yeah, so in terms of mirroring behavior, we're not talking about neurons now, we're talking about visible behavior. So the way people sit or the way people stand around the room. If you want to establish a bond quickly with somebody else, then a good way to do that in nonverbal terms, you still have to have the conversation. It's still about the content, but a good way to do that in nonverbal terms is to mirror their behavior. Now, let me quickly say, you have to do that subtly and just mirror their kind of big body positioning, where their legs are, how they're standing, or if they're leaning one way or the other. You don't mirror every single little bit of behavior. That would get strange and look odd. So, but you can notice this yourself. The best way to get the idea, to get the hang of this, is to when you're at a restaurant, say, watch the other people, the other diners, and if you see two people who are in love, you'll see that they tend to move in the same way as one. They match each other's behavior just naturally and effortlessly without any conscious attempt at it. Or if you see two old friends who are in broad agreement about their attitude toward life, and they're telling each other stories, and they're relaxed and happy, you'll see them mirroring each other's behavior just naturally. We tend to mirror the behavior unconsciously of people that we're comfortable with, or that we love, or that we like, or that we trust deeply. And so deliberately mirroring behavior in a very subtle, simple way is a good way of beginning quickly establishing trust, making it feel like a more longer-term, deeper relationship than it actually is.
I want to touch base at the beginning. You mentioned about the voice, the whole reason you wrote Power Cues. Whoever's listening out there, highly recommend get Nick's book. Power Cues is fantastic. I just have it in front of me right now. It's
Thanks.
on page 120, and you talk about, do you have a leadership voice? Can you touch base on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is my favorite amazing research that's out these days, and people haven't heard of it. It's extraordinary. So it turns out that what happens is when we get people together in a room, we elect unconsciously. We're not aware of this process. I have to stress that. Unconsciously, we elect the leader in the room, and we do it within a very few minutes by matching our voices to the leader's voice. And what happens is the leader, to understand what I mean, you have to know a little bit about how the voice works. So the amazing thing about the human voice is that we can all understand without much effort, without any effort at all really, lots of other people's voices. So you know all your family's voices, your friends' voices, your colleagues' voices, a bunch of famous people, politicians, movie stars and things. We can all recognize this whole retinue of voices without making any effort at all. Well, you hear the voice and we go, oh, that's George Clooney, or that's Barack Obama, or that's Vladimir Putin, right? We instantly know these voices. So the question is, how do we do that? Well, it's because every voice is individual. It's unique. Like a fingerprint, the sound of a voice has, in addition to the regular pitch at which it's speaking, it has what musicians call overtones and undertones that add up to a specific vocal fingerprint, if you will, so that every voice sounds different. But it turns out that those undertones are what we match up. So we actually unconsciously, without at all being aware of it, we match our undertones to the leader in the room. We used to say, have the phrase, everybody's on the same wavelength. We literally get on the same wavelength as the leader. And so what I talk about in the book is how to strengthen your voice so that you put out these powerful undertones so that you can be the leader.
Why don't we, do you mind if we go through one of those exercises to strengthen your tones?
Sure. It's a little hard to do. It's easier to do in person, a little hard to do over the airways, but we can try. I mean,
there's a first for everything.
Yeah, right. So the first thing to understand is very simply, your voice needs to be at the lower end of your range rather than the higher end. And if you think about it, this makes simple, intuitive sense. So what happens when we panic? Let's say we see somebody about to get hit by a car and we want to scream and save them. What does our voice do?
It goes up.
It goes up, obviously. That's how we show tension. That's how we show passion. But we don't show authority and control when our voice is at the upper end of our range. You know, then it sounds like we're going crazy. Right? When the voice goes up, it's, ah! Right? That sounds like panic. So this is the opposite of that. We need to move our voice down to the lower end of the range. And there's a very specific point, it turns out, where that pitch is. So for each person, everybody has a slightly different vocal range. What you need to do is find the lowest note that you can comfortably hum or match, and the highest note you can comfortably hum or match. This works for both men and women, by the way. And you need to come up a quarter of the way from the bottom end of your range. At that point, your voice is its strongest, let's say. It puts out the broadest array of those undertones, and so it sounds most like a leadership voice. It's the difference, if I can just try it here, over the radio waves. It's the difference between a voice that sounds like this, sort of rich and deep, because this is at the lower end of my range, right? And a voice that sounds like this, which is up here somewhere, right? You wouldn't want to follow this voice, but you might be more inclined to follow this voice. And I'm exaggerating, so obviously for effect, but
sure.
You get the idea. At the lower end, the voice sounds more authoritative. At the higher end, it sounds more nasal. It sounds less commanding, less like a leader. And so this is about finding the specific point where your voice is the strongest. Because everybody can do that. You want to pick a day when you're not stressed, because stress tends to push our voices up. You want to pick a day when you haven't drunk tons and tons of coffee, because coffee tightens up our vocal cords. So you need to relax. Alcohol does the same thing, so don't have 2 drinks to relax. That won't do it. Drink lots of water and relax your voice, and then find your range. And then come up a quarter from the bottom, and that pitch, which is above, for me, it's roughly where I'm speaking right now, is the maximum leadership pitch for your voice. That's where you sound most in charge. And when you think about this, it's incredibly important. Say when you are giving that pitch to the venture capitalist, right? You're going to be nervous, and that's going to push your voice up here, and you're going to say, please give me the money because I've got a really good idea. They're not going to believe it. If instead you say, please give me the money because I've got really great ideas, a company that can't miss, you're going to sound much more likely like somebody that they'd want to give money to. That's the basic idea here. But it turns out there's some good hard science behind it that shows that we can't line up behind the leader unless that leader is speaking at the right pitch.
So would you recommend somebody like practices 2-3 times a week for this?
Well, what I do with my clients is we do the exercise, we find their maximum resonance point. So it's a note. It's easiest you have a piano, but if you don't have a piano, you can Google keyboard and get an electronic one. Not quite as good, but it will work. And then, so find your pitch, find your maximum resonance point, record that into your cell phone, and then just play it for yourself before you go into a key meeting so that you don't get nervous and push your voice up. And that's what most people report most of the time. When they're under stress, when they're going to an important meeting or to give a presentation, their voices tend to go up in pitch. We unconsciously reveal the stress. So what this is about is pulling that voice back down to the comfortable pitch where you sound more authoritative.
Is there ways for us to manipulate our vocal cords?
Oh, plenty of ways. Yeah, absolutely. The most important and the one that we can try again here over the air is by breathing. Basically, voices can either be more or less resonant, which has to do with having breath, the lungs inflated, lots of breath support. Or they can be more or less nasal, and I already indicated what that sounds like. When my voice sounds nasal, it goes up into my nose, right, and I'm not breathing deeply. So
yeah, that's right.
Again, it's both better for your voice, but also more persuasive. If instead of going up here, you come back down here and use the chest voice. To do that, you either manipulate the voice deliberately or you support it with air, and that's the other exercise that your listeners can do, which is stand. It's better standing. So stand up, relax your shoulders, don't move them, and take a deep breath But imagine your stomach, your belly is like an eyedropper, and you're expanding the eyedropper as you breathe in. So this is the opposite way most people breathe. It's counterintuitive. But if you take a deep breath, like you're filling a bellows, stomach is the bellows, so that you got to get unself-conscious about this and not think about this makes your stomach look fat. So you have to let go of that. But take a deep breath, hold it in there with your abdominal muscles, and gradually squeeze those muscles like you're about to be punched in the stomach, but much more slowly and gently. And gradually squeeze the air out like squeezing a bellows. Using your abdominal muscles, squeeze the air out through your mouth. That breathing will support your voice, create more resonance, create more of those good undertones that make your voice more authoritative.
So is this what stage actors reframe to as diaphragmic breathing?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's what, for example, in the U.S., Ronald Reagan, who was called a great communicator and was considered to have a wonderful voice, he learned to do that through years of acting and then radio work. People taught him to breathe diaphragmatically so that his voice had that nice, rich, resonant sound, and people followed him.
So each single time, do you want to like make your point come across? Is you're breathing, say, from your nose deeply, and you want your belly to expand, and once your belly is expanded, you want to use that air pressure to communicate through your vocal cords.
Yes, and so you have to learn, you have to practice it so that it doesn't become obvious. You don't want to.
That's right. 1 second, I got to say something.
Excuse me, I'm taking this big breath, right? But if you watch, a good thing to do is Google some famous opera singer, Luciano Pavarotti or one of those, and if you watch him and Google high C for a tenor. And if you watch him hit a high C, so they'll have a little clip where he's getting ready to hit a high C, you'll see him breathing just before he gets ready to hit that high C because he knows it takes a lot of air support. So that's what we're talking about, is a quick little breath before you say something that's really important. Another thing you can do, of course, is this is prep before you go into the meeting. You go into the bathroom and take a couple of deep, slow breaths. That both calms you down as well as filling your lungs full of air, and so that enriches and strengthens your voice.
If someone's really nervous, Nick, and say they're a wreck when it comes to communication, what would you give them as like the beginner's tip? You know, we mentioned a couple of things. You know, you have mirror neurons, then you have body mimicry, then we have, you know, expanding our vocal cords through finding our pitch, going 1/4 up, and now we're talking about diaphragmic breathing. You know, those are a couple of things we touch base on. However, say like you're a real wreck and you just are, you know, genuinely scared. What's the first thing you would tell your clients to do in order to kind of start transforming their communication skills?
Well, there are a couple of things. And it depends on the individual as to what's bothering you the most. It's typically either the physical symptoms, so your heart beats fast, or your hands get clammy, or I literally coached a client once whose knees rattled back and forth. His knees knocked. I thought that was just a proverbial expression, but it is in fact real. This guy actually, his legs wobbled visibly, so that was the first thing he had to do, was get them under control. So there's either the physical symptoms, or other people are more bothered by the mind racing and saying, this is going to be a disaster, you're going to suck, this is going to be terrible, you're going to screw up, you're going to forget important, you know, that little dialogue you have with the devil in your head that's telling you this isn't going to work. And so you've got to decide, which is it that's bothering me more as a beginner? Is it the physical symptoms, or is it the head trip that I'm on? And if it's the physical symptoms, then what you want to do is a couple of things. You want to do that breathing very slowly that we talked about. That starts an autonomic relaxation response, and so that will calm you down, but you have to practice it. And then the other thing is to stand or sit and take each of the muscle groups in your body and tense them and release them. Tense them and release them. So start with your feet, for example. Tense up your feet as much as you can, and then release the tension. And then go to your calves and tense those and release them. And then your thighs, and work your way up the body, tensing every muscle group and releasing them. That process will distract you from the physical symptoms and will help get rid of the extra tension. If that still doesn't do it, then a little bit of moderate exercise before the big moment can help. So don't go for like a 26-mile run. You don't want to do a marathon because then you're just going to collapse in a sweaty heap and it won't be good. But do a quick a walk around the block, or go to the gym and just do a few reps of something just to calm you down a little bit, not to wear you out. So those are things you can do if the physical symptoms are really bothering you. If it's the mental symptoms that are worse for you, then you need to start a dialogue with that devil in your head. So every time the devil says you're going to suck, you're going to forget what you're going to say, you're going to be terrible, you're going to embarrass yourself, then you need to respond. And this sounds kind of wacky, but it works. You're going to need to respond by saying, nope, I know my topic, I've rehearsed it, it's going to go great, or whatever words of comfort you can offer yourself. So work out a little mantra like, I'm ready, I'm prepared, it's going to be great. And every time the doubt creeps into your head and you hear that little voice saying it's going to be bad, say, I'm ready, I'm prepared, it's going to be great. And you may have to do that 100 times a day, 200 times a day. But that does work for people who have that kind of mental thought racing issue. And if you do that enough, then when you get into the actual presentation or the actual meeting, you're going to find that you've silenced that devil in your head, and you'll have a clear thinking and a clear mind.
Well, it just goes to show you the leaders aren't born. You know, when it comes to communication and telling your message and story, just like anything in life, it takes practice, 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 and constantly improving on your craft.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a nice way of putting it. I tell people that you can leave all this unconscious communication to chance. You can walk into a meeting radiating your to-do list or your nervousness, but don't you want to go in being your best self?
Mm.
And if you're going to be your best self, that does take work. It's just like getting buff, getting fit. It takes exercise. It takes daily work, and eating right and getting the sleep like we were talking about before we started here.
That's right.
And if you're not doing that, then you can't expect to get physically fit in the same way.
That's right.
If you're not doing the work, you can't expect to be a leader just by pure dumb luck or accident.
Exactly. Well, awesome, Nick. We'll leave it at that. I want to thank you so much for coming on the Amir Rosic Show. If people want to find more information about you, where can they contact you at?
Go to our website, publicwordswithad.com. It's newly revamped. It looks fabulous. We just came out with our new one yesterday, and so I'm very excited.
Awesome.
Please go visit the website and leave a comment for our fabulous webmaster redesigner who did such a beautiful job.
I love your website. I get your emails nonstop, and they're fantastic. Anybody looking to up their communication skills, regardless of what position you have in life, go check out Nick's website. And plus, go buy Power Cues. I put in my top 10 books of 2015. Once again, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show. Have an amazing day.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you so much. You have a great day, too.